We're following breaking news in Florida as a federal judge has just dismissed the classified documents case against former President Donald Trump. Judge Eileen Cannon said in a 93-page order that she has granted Trump's bid to dismiss the indictment based on the unlawful funding and appointment of special counsel Jack Smith. Smith is the one who brought the charges against the former president. Trump was facing 40 charges stemming from his alleged handling of documents marked classified after leaving office and accused of obstructing the Justice Department's investigation.
Okay, so here we go again. And I mean that literally, because what just happened in a federal courtroom is absolutely insane. Like, this isn't your typical political drama. This is the kind of stuff that makes you stop scrolling, put your phone down, and just stare at the wall for a second. On November 13th, 2025, a federal judge named Marianne Keller did something that nobody saw coming. She unsealed evidence. Sealed evidence. The kind of stuff that's supposed to stay locked away in some vault somewhere because it's too sensitive, too explosive, too whatever. But Judge Keller said, nope. Public interest. The American people deserve to know. And just like that, she cracked open Pandora's box. And what was inside? Oh, just some light reading. Transcripts of private meetings, financial records, communications about January 6th. Nothing major, except it is major. It's massive, because we're talking about evidence that directly involves Trump, his advisors, and what some are calling illegal directives about Capitol security. Yeah, let that sink in for a second. Now here's where it gets wild. Within 24 hours of this evidence getting unsealed, members of Congress started calling for Trump's arrest. Not just any members. We're talking people like Jamie Raskin, who went on X and basically said, if there's criminality here, the Department of Justice can't sit on their hands anymore. He literally posted, this evidence must be scrutinized, and if criminality is clear, the Department of Justice cannot delay arrest any longer. Can you believe this? We're not talking about some political theater where everyone's just posturing for the cameras. This is a sitting member of Congress publicly demanding that the former president be arrested. And he's not alone. Even Lisa Murkowski, a Republican senator, came out swinging. She said, we can't let sealed files hide corruption. The American people deserve the truth, no matter how high the stakes. So like when you've got people from both sides of the aisle saying the same thing, you know something big is happening. This isn't partisan noise. This is different. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
This dismissal of the case being called unconstitutional caps a stunning weekend for the former president, who was the target of an assassination attempt during a rally with his supporters in Butler County, Pennsylvania. We're going to continue bringing you any new developments on the investigation into that case as well.
But let's back up for a second. Why were these files sealed in the first place? And why now? Why did Judge Keller decide that after all this time, after all the legal battles and the back and forth, that this was the moment to unseal everything? What changed? Here's the thing. Sealed evidence is supposed to protect sensitive information, national security stuff, privacy concerns, things that could, cause chaos if they got out. But Judge Keller looked at these files and said, actually, the public interest outweighs all of that. The American people need to see what's in here. And that's a huge deal, because judges don't just unseal evidence on a whim. There's a process. There's a legal standard. And for Judge Keller to make this call, she must have seen something in those files that made her think, yeah, this can't stay hidden. And now that the files are out, Congress is going nuclear. Democrats are calling for investigations. Republicans 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 are calling. Everyone's calling for investigations. And the DOJ, they're sitting there like, what do we do now? Because this isn't just a political problem. This is a legal nightmare. The evidence includes transcripts of private meetings between Trump's advisors and legislative staff. And according to reports from CNN and BBC, some of those transcripts reference what they're calling illegal directives regarding Capitol security. Now, we don't know exactly what that means yet. The details are still coming out. But the fact that those words are even being used, that's terrifying. Because if Trump or his team gave illegal orders about security during January 6th, that's not just impeachable, that's criminal. And here's the kicker. This isn't happening in a vacuum. We're in 2025. Trump's serving his second term. He's already back in the White House. And now suddenly evidence from years ago is getting unsealed. Congress is demanding arrests, and the whole country is watching to see what happens next. It's like watching a slow-motion car crash, except the car is on fire and heading straight for a gas station. So yeah, this is wild. This is unprecedented, and this is exactly the kind of story that's going to dominate the news cycle for weeks, maybe months. Because we're not just talking about politics anymore. We're talking about accountability. We're talking about the rule of law. We're talking about whether or not a president, even a sitting president, can be held responsible for actions that happened before he took office again. And honestly, I don't know where this goes from here, but I know one thing, it's going to be messy. The legal complexities alone are enough to make your head spin. The political ramifications are even worse. And the American people, they're caught right in the middle of all of it. So let's dive in and try to make sense of this absolute chaos. Because trust me, you're going to want to understand what's really happening here. This isn't just another news story. This could change everything. The foundations of our government, the relationship between the executive branch and the justice system, the very concept of presidential immunity, all of it is on the table now. And what happens in the next few weeks could reshape American democracy for generations to come. All right, so let's dig into this. Because on the surface, this story sounds like just another Trump legal battle. And like, I get it, we've been here before. The investigations, the lawsuits, the congressional hearings, it's exhausting. But this time, something's different. This time, the evidence isn't just being talked about in closed-door meetings or leaked to the press in bits and pieces. It's been officially unsealed by a federal judge. And that changes everything. Judge Marianne Keller isn't some random political appointee. She's been on the bench for years. She's handled major cases. She's not known for making reckless decisions. So when she decided to unseal these files, you can bet she had a good reason. And according to her ruling, that reason was public interest. She basically said, look, the American people have a right to know what's in these documents, and whatever's in there is important enough that it outweighs any concerns about privacy or sensitivity. Now, what exactly is in those files? Well, we're still learning, but what we know so far is pretty damning. There are financial records related to Trump's campaign, there are communications about January 6th, and there are transcripts of private meetings between Trump's advisors and legislative staff. In some of those transcripts, they mention illegal directives about Capitol security. The sheer volume of material is staggering. We're talking hundreds of pages of documents, emails, text messages, recorded conversations, the whole 9 yards. And this isn't just random stuff either. This is curated evidence that prosecutors and investigators have been building cases around for years. Let's pause there for a second. Illegal directives about Capitol security. What does that even mean? Well, it could mean a lot of things. It could mean that someone in Trump's orbit told Capitol Police to stand down. It could mean that someone interfered with security protocols. It could mean that there was a deliberate effort to leave the Capitol vulnerable. We don't know yet, but the fact that those words are being used at all is a huge red flag. And here's the thing. If it turns out that Trump or his team did give illegal orders about Capitol security, that's not just a political scandal, that's a crime, a serious crime. The kind of crime that could lead to arrests, indictments, and maybe even jail time. And that's why Congress is freaking out right now. Jamie Raskin's tweet wasn't just political grandstanding. He was making a very specific point. He was saying, if the evidence shows criminal behavior, the DOJ has a legal obligation to act. And he's right. The Department of Justice can't just ignore evidence of a crime, no matter who's involved, even if that person is the sitting president. But here's where it gets complicated. Can you actually arrest a sitting president? That's a legal question that nobody really wants to answer, because there's no clear precedent. The Constitution doesn't say you can't arrest the president, but it also doesn't say you can. And that ambiguity has been used for years to shield presidents from legal consequences while they're in office. The legal gray area is enormous, and constitutional scholars have been debating this exact scenario for decades. But now it's not theoretical anymore. It's real. It's happening right now. Some legal scholars argue that a sitting president can't be indicted or arrested because it would interfere with their ability to govern. Others argue that nobody is above the law, not even the president. And right now, with this evidence out in the open and Congress demanding action, we might be about to find out which interpretation wins. Lisa Murkowski's statement is especially interesting because she's a Republican. She's not some progressive Democrat looking for any excuse to go after Trump. She's a moderate Republican who's been willing to break with her party before. And for her to come out and say that sealed files can't be used to hide corruption, that's significant. because it shows that this isn't just partisan noise. There are people on both sides of the aisle who think this evidence needs to be taken seriously. And then there's the timing of all this. Like, why now? Why did Judge Keller unseal these files in November 2025? Trump's already serving his second term. He's already in the White House? So what's the point of unsealing evidence about stuff that happened years ago, during and after January 6th? Well, here's one theory. Maybe Judge Keller was waiting for the right moment. Maybe she wanted to see how things played out politically before making this decision. Or maybe, and this is where it gets really interesting, maybe she was under pressure from other parts of the legal system to release this information. Because here's the thing, there are a lot of ongoing investigations into Trump and his administration. And if this evidence is relevant to those investigations, then keeping it sealed would be obstructing justice. The timing could also be strategic. With Trump back in office, the political landscape has shifted. The dynamics have changed. And maybe Judge Keller figured that now, with Trump's power consolidated, was actually the perfect time to release this information. Because it can't be dismissed as election interference or political motivation. The election is over. Trump won, he's president. So this is purely about accountability now. So by unsealing it, Judge Keller might have just forced the DOJ's hand. She might have put them in a position where they have no choice but to act. Because now that the evidence is public, they can't just sweep it under the rug. They have to do something with it. And that brings us to the financial records. Because it's not just about January 6th. The unsealed files also include financial records related to Trump's campaign. And according to multiple reports, those records show some pretty questionable transactions. We're talking about money moving in ways that don't quite add up. Payments to shell companies, donations from sources that maybe shouldn't have been donating. The kind of stuff that if it turns out to be illegal, could open up a whole new can of worms. Now, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know exactly what the legal standard is for campaign finance violations, but I do know that if Trump's campaign was taking money from illegal sources, or if they were hiding transactions, or if they were using campaign funds for personal expenses, that's a big deal. That's the kind of thing that gets people indicted. And when you combine the financial stuff with the January 6th stuff, you start to see a pattern. You start to see a picture of an administration that maybe wasn't playing by the rules, and that's what has Congress so fired up right now. The financial trail is often what brings down politicians. It's one thing to have questionable communications or suspicious meetings, but money leaves a paper trail. Money is concrete. Money is evidence that prosecutors can take to a jury and say, look, here's proof of criminal activity. Because here's the reality. Congress has been investigating Trump for years. They've held hearings, they've subpoenaed documents, they've interviewed witnesses, but they've always been limited by what they could access. A lot of the really damaging evidence has been sealed or classified or otherwise kept out of their hands. But now they've got access to stuff they've never seen before. And that's why people like Jamie Raskin are calling for arrests. They're looking at this evidence and saying, okay, we finally have what we need. We finally have proof. And if the DOJ doesn't act on this, then what's the point of having laws in the first place? But here's the million-dollar question. Will the DOJ actually do anything? Because let's be real, arresting a sitting president would be unprecedented. It would cause a constitutional crisis. It would probably lead to riots in the streets. It would tear the country apart, even more than it already is. So even if the evidence is damning, even if it's crystal clear that crimes were committed, the DOJ might decide that the political fallout isn't worth it. They might decide that it's better to wait until Trump's out of office. Or they might decide to pursue other avenues, like impeachment or censure, instead of criminal charges. And that's the frustrating part. Because we've been down this road before, we've seen evidence of wrongdoing, we've seen investigations launched, we've seen congressional hearings and special counsels and all of it, but at the end of the day, nothing ever seems to happen. The powerful stay powerful, the system protects itself, and the rest of us are just left wondering if justice even exists anymore. But maybe this time is different. Maybe this time, with the evidence unsealed and Congress demanding action and the whole world watching, maybe this time something actually happens. Maybe this time, accountability isn't just a buzzword. We'll see. The next few weeks will be absolutely critical in determining which direction this goes. Okay, so let's break this down into simple terms, because I know this whole story is a lot. There's a lot of legal jargon, a lot of political maneuvering, a lot of unknowns, but at its core, this story is pretty straightforward. Point number one, a federal judge unsealed evidence that was supposed to stay hidden. Judge Marianne Keller made the decision to release files that include financial records, communications about January 6th, and transcripts of private meetings. And she did this because she believed the public had a right to know what was in those files. That's huge, because sealed evidence doesn't just get unsealed for no reason. There has to be a compelling justification, and Judge Keller clearly thought she had one. Point number 2. The unsealed evidence is damning. We're talking about references to illegal directives about capital security. We're talking about financial transactions that don't add up. We're talking about communications between Trump's advisors and legislative staff that suggest coordination around January 6th. Now, we don't have all the details yet. The full contents of these files haven't been made public, but what we do know is enough to make Congress demand action. Point number 3, Congress is calling for Trump's arrest, and not just Democrats, Republicans too. Jamie Raskin's tweet was explicit. He said the DOJ can't delay if there's clear evidence of criminality. Lisa Murkowski echoed that sentiment, and there are reports that other members of Congress, both in the House and the Senate, are preparing to push for formal investigations and potential criminal referrals. Point number 4, the DOJ is in a tough spot because arresting a sitting president is uncharted territory. There's no clear legal precedent for it, and even if the evidence justifies an arrest, the political ramifications would be massive. We're talking about a potential constitutional crisis. We're talking about protests, maybe violence, definitely chaos. So the DOJ has to weigh the legal requirements against the practical realities. This is the kind of decision that could define someone's entire career and potentially alter the course of American history. Now, let's talk about why this matters. Because you might be thinking, okay, another Trump scandal, so what? We've seen this before. And yeah, you're right, we have seen this before. But this time, the stakes are different. For one thing, Trump is currently serving his second term. He's in the White House right now. And if he gets arrested or even indicted while he's president, that would be a first in American history. It would fundamentally change the relationship between the executive branch and the justice system. It would set a precedent that could affect every future president. For another thing, the evidence that's been unsealed isn't just about Trump personally. It's about his campaign, his advisors, his whole operation. And if it turns out that there was a coordinated effort to interfere with Capitol security during January 6th, that's not just one person's crime. That's a conspiracy. That's multiple people breaking the law. And that opens the door to a much wider investigation. We could be looking at dozens of indictments, not just one. We could be looking at a legal proceeding that makes Watergate look like a parking ticket. And then there's the political impact. We're in 2025. Trump's second term is well underway. But within the Republican Party, there are already rumblings about who's going to be the next leader. Ron DeSantis is still in the picture. There are other governors, senators, rising stars who are positioning themselves for the future. And if Trump gets taken down by this scandal, that's going to create a massive power vacuum. On the Democratic side, this is a gift because they can point to this evidence and say, see, we told you. We told you Trump was corrupt. We told you he was dangerous. We told you he broke the law. And now there's proof. So expect Democrats to hammer this issue hard. Expect fundraising emails. Expect attack ads. Expect every Democratic politician to talk about nothing but accountability and the rule of law for the next several months. But here's the thing. The American people are tired. Like, genuinely exhausted. We've been living through political chaos for years now. And every time something like this happens, every time there's a new scandal or investigation or bombshell revelation, a lot of people just tune out because it's too much. It's overwhelming. And when you're overwhelmed, it's easier to just stop paying attention. So the big question is, will this actually move the needle? Will people care? Or will this just be another story that dominates the news for a week and then fades into the background? I think it depends on what happens next. If the DOJ actually does something, if they issue indictments or make arrests or take some kind of concrete action, then yeah, people will care because that would be real. That would be tangible. That would be proof that the system works, that accountability exists, that nobody is above the law. But if the DOJ sits on this, if they drag their feet or issue some vague statement about ongoing investigations and then nothing happens, then people are going to lose faith. They're going to think the whole thing is rigged. They're going to think that the powerful can do whatever they want and never face consequences. And honestly, I don't know which way it's going to go because the DOJ is in an impossible position. They're damned if they do, damned if they don't. If they arrest Trump, half the country will lose their minds. If they don't arrest Trump, the other half will lose their minds. There's no good option here. But here's what I do know. This story isn't going away. The evidence is out there now. Congress is paying attention. The media is paying attention. And the American people, whether they want to or not, are going to have to reckon with what this evidence means. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about Trump. It's about what kind of country we want to be. It's about whether we believe in accountability or whether we're okay with letting the powerful write their own rules. It's about whether the law applies to everyone equally or whether there's one set of rules for the rich and connected and another set for everyone else? And those are questions that matter. Those are questions that every single person in this country should be thinking about, because the answers we come up with are going to define us for generations. So where does this leave us? Well, in the short term, expect chaos. Expect more revelations as reporters dig through the unsealed files. Expect more statements from Congress. Expect the White House to go into damage control mode. Expect Trump's lawyers to file motions and appeals and try every legal trick in the book to suppress this evidence or discredit it. In the medium term, expect investigations. The DOJ is going to have to do something. Even if they don't arrest Trump, they're going to have to at least pretend like they're taking this seriously. So expect grand juries, subpoenas, witness interviews, all that stuff. And in the long term, who knows? Maybe Trump survives this like he survived everything else. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe this is the thing that finally brings him down. Or maybe it just becomes another chapter in the long, weird saga of American politics in the 2020s. But one thing's for sure, we're living through history right now. And whether we like it or not, we're all going to remember where we were when this story broke. So buckle up, because this ride is just getting started. And yeah, I'll be here breaking down every twist and turn as it happens. Because somebody's got to make sense of this madness. Might as well be us. The next few weeks are going to be absolutely critical. Watch the DOJ, watch Congress, watch how the White House responds. And most importantly, watch what happens with this evidence. Because if there's one thing we've learned over the past few years, it's that nothing is predictable anymore. The rules we thought we knew, they don't apply. The norms we thought were sacred, they're gone. We're in uncharted territory now. And the only thing we can do is pay attention and demand answers. Because this isn't about politics. This is about justice. And that's something worth fighting for.